right now. Morris and Bruce Hawker, our political strategist. Good to see you both. Thanks for joining us. Look, before we get to all things budget, I just wanted to make this point. Is it a little bit odd that the High Court, I know they're independent, they don't, not influenced by politics and so on, but they've decided of all days, Wednesday in budget week, to announce the Katie Gallagher decision, which will have huge political ramifications. If she's found ineligible, suddenly we could be looking at potentially 4 by-elections for other MPs who are in the same sort of situation. Graham, they could have chosen nearly any other day.
It is 100% the wrong day in Canberra. You know, when you think about it, the day after the budget, where everyone is rushing to the media and whatnot to have their view of the budget, the journalists themselves are trying to analyse things. The Treasurer is at the press club, and the opposition leader the next day is at the press club with his response. So everything is converging on news-wise on Canberra, and in the middle of that, the High Court decides it's going to drop this bomb, which really could result in a mini-election.
Yeah, well, exactly. It could. I mean, 4 by-elections, not to mention the Tim Hammond one that's looming as well. Anyway, we'll see. But Bruce, I mean, I know the High Court is beyond reproach, and we shouldn't criticise even its timing of decisions, but it is a little weird, isn't it?
Well, it is a lot, but justice is blind, and so too is the registry at the High Court, I suspect. And so they will just go ahead and do what they do in the way in which they do. And in fact, that's a pretty good thing, actually, at the end of the day. I've got to say, it may be inconvenient,
well, I guess.
It is a good thing.
Yeah,
but it is important, isn't it? Because we do have a very important economic statement coming out, very important for both sides of Parliament, and it could well be that if Senator Gallagher goes down on Wednesday, there could be 4 Labor politicians and one independent
one Nick Xenophon,
up for a by-election, which would actually be a test of all the budget stuff that's going to be announced this week. So they are very, very inextricably...
It's a big week, in other words. We'll find out the fiscal strategy and then could soon be facing, as you put it, Graham, a bit of a mini-election if they're all held at once. Now, let's get to the day before the budget eve. And look, the broad parameters of this budget seem pretty clear. Graham, what's your sense of what the government will be trying to do tomorrow night?
That it is... Look, any budget is difficult. This is really hard to do. But to get that balance right is quite tricky, and I think you could argue that several governments in the last several years have not quite got the balance right. The government looks as if what it's trying to do is to be economically responsible and sensible and just keep an eye on that surplus and the deficit. That's one. The other is that it looks as if the economy is growing, and that there ought to be benefits come back to mums and dads, so there'll be some tax cuts there. But also it seems that the government has an eye on a number of things in that sort of infrastructure area that could be important for future growth in the future economy, but it has not lost sight of politics. There are many in the backbench who have had to almost sell unsellable things, and it looks as if, in this budget at least, the backbench is going to have some good news to explain to their constituents, and not a lot of ugly news to try to explain. And this time of the political cycle, that's good.
Yeah, I mean, look, Bruce, it's all well and good for some of us to sit here and say they should use every dollar of extra revenue, as the government, in fact, said they would some time ago, to tackle debt, to get us back to surplus and then start paying off the debt. But that does kind of ignore some political realities here, doesn't it?
Yeah, it sure does, including the fact that this will be the last budget, most likely before the election. And so this will be an election budget. The government's going to go in there with as many sweeteners as they possibly can. There haven't been too many leaks out of the pre-budget process, so I think they're looking to make a bit of a statement with that. I think we'll probably see a lot of goodies for states like Western Australia, where they definitely need to really improve if they've got any prospect of winning the next election. That's the sort of thing that I think you need to look for on budget night, where the big bundles of money are going, because that'll give you an indication also of where they're going to be campaigning and how they're going to be campaigning. I don't think that they're in a very good position as far as tax cuts for the big end of town is concerned. Whatever they do on the night, they're still going to leave themselves open to an attack from Labor, which says, look, you're giving tax cuts to the wrong people, the banks, the multinationals, the people who don't pay tax anyway, and you could be spending much more on mum and dad. That's a very powerful argument in an election year as well. So I think it'll be very interesting. I think it'll be probably a reasonably well-targeted budget, but it's still got a lot of vulnerabilities built into it for Scott Morrison and the Prime Minister.
Yeah, I mean, Grahame, what do you think about that point, that while ever the company tax cuts for the bigger businesses are still there, it is going to be a tough one for the government right up to the election?
I agree. Look, I've been around politics for a long time, and there's only two things that I've found difficult to explain. One was John Hewson's first GST thing in Fight Back. It was very complicated. And the other, in the climate, and remember, in the climate, is the tax cuts to some of the big industries and big players, I mean. You know, we all know that the consequences of Australia being a high tax country and others being lower than us is going to hurt us. We all know that. But it is very difficult in this current climate to explain it to mums and dads that for the national good and the economy and for employers, it's really, really important that we reduce the income tax. But in this sort of climate where some of the big end of town have been a bit naughty, it's hard.
Do you think, well, let's just turn to Labor here, Bruce. What do you think Bill Shorten needs to do on Thursday night? His previous budget replies, he has actually put a bit of policy out there. This will be presumably the last one, so an important one before election. Does he need to... well, one thing I suspect he should be doing at least is clearing up the position on company tax cuts, right? So will Labor actually agree to keep those already passed through the Parliament in place? I'm not sure, though, whether he'll use this week to announce his alternative income tax plans. That might come close to the election. But what do you think, Bruce? What does he need to do?
Well, I don't think he should be playing around with income tax for small business. I think anything that has a smell of retrospectivity about it is not a good thing. But that's not the case with...
Because to be clear, at the moment, Labor's position is they support them up to $2 million, company, small business up to $2 million. But the Parliament's already passed up to $50 million, businesses up to $50 million. And we don't know what Labor's going to do about that at the moment. So, well, he probably needs to clear that up.
He does need to clear that up, but I think he needs to be also careful when he does clear it up that he doesn't create some confusion or the opportunity for the government to spread confusion in the minds of small business owners and other people who are dependent on that tax cut. That would be a mistake, I think, tactically on the part of the opposition. I don't think they're in the business of making too many tactical mistakes at the moment. I think they're pretty much on the money. So I think he will focus more on benefits for people in the lower tax groups, the people who make up the bulk of the voting public, and who, frankly, can stimulate the economy with a well-directed cut to income tax. Whether he actually locks himself in at this stage, I'm not sure, because whatever he locks himself into now will obviously predicate the actual campaign. That's what he'll be confined to. So he may not want to be overly prescriptive in what he says, but I think he has to give a pretty fair indication about where he goes. And I think he will hammer away.
Unless I was going to say on the timing, Labor's suddenly having to fight 4 or 5 by-elections, and we might see the colour of the opposition leader's money on income tax cuts.
You may well.
You may well. And that will influence his speech on Thursday.
You think so, yeah?
Like, it could well be that if the High Court throws out Katie Gallagher, the main questions to Bill Shorten on Thursday will be, are you going to dismiss your 4 people from the Parliament today because they're there illegally? That is very tricky, coming across, where he's trying to be serious on a budget reply. Look, the big one for him is, look, we know he hates anybody who employs people, and he's going to give all the business people a whack in the nose. The trick is how far down he goes with all of this tax grab he's got. And I've watched the Shadow Treasurer in recent times talking about things being crystal clear, that Labor is making things crystal clear. I got news for him. There is no crystal that is clear. And I don't know which country he grew up in, but for most Australians, crystal is that sort of cut glass, and it's anything but clear. You can't see anything in it.
I don't think Chris Barnes is the first to use the phrase crystal clear, but...
He does. He uses it all the time,
no, but
and it's anything but
I don't
clear.
think he's the first to actually coin that phrase. But anyway, the point is, how far does he go with that on the budget focus, at least on Thursday night, Graham? I mean, as I say, I think company tax cut's something he needs to clear up. But if you were advising him, you know, would you say put the income tax cut detail out there this week, wait until closer to the election?
Or are you going to play politics? And remember, you might have a mini election coming up.
Perhaps he says we support, you know, whatever the company the personal income tax cuts are, and you know, before the election we'll announce a more detailed approach or something like that.
I think he's. I don't think he wants to go out there and just be straight batting every question that comes along, because that doesn't give him the opportunity to hit a few for 4 and 6. So I think he has to be pretty clear that you know, that what the general area is going to be where the income tax benefits are going to come, and who is going to not get the benefit of that income tax. I mean, there's some argument about you know, the government now pushing for people in the higher income, income brackets. He won't. I don't think he's going to get in there. But there are a lot of people who are really struggling, who I think he's going to be trying to give a lot of reassurance to on the night and in the coming weeks. He doesn't want to be standing there just not answering the questions, because I think that means that he loses an opportunity to go in hard on other aspects.
And Bruce, just finally to Graham's other point though about the if the High Court rules against Gallagher, do you think Bill Shorten should very quickly make clear whether he's going to punt those other 3 who are under a cloud, or I mean, what do you think he should do on that? Because that'll be a very live question on Wednesday.
Yeah. I think he needs to, you know, arm himself with all the legal advice that he possibly can around that issue, so that if the preponderance of legal advice is that those people should go, then I think they make that call quickly and let that happen, rather than having it just bleed. You know, the worst thing in politics is the drip, drip, drip of the other side.
I mean, arguably on Wednesday, Labor could move its own motion in Parliament and have a referral of all of them
potentially
who do have a cloud over them, if the court rules that way.
Indeed. And that would be a further demonstration that the law is an ass in this area. But I'm not sure that there would be too much more that you could do. You'd want to get this thing sorted sooner rather than later. That'd be the point I'd be making. Yeah. And Labor shouldn't be too scared of by-elections right now in the main, because they are in an ascendant position.
Yeah, well, we'll see what happens after this budget, though, whether that changes at all. Bruce Hawker, Grahame Morris, lots to come this week. I look forward to catching up with you next week.
Yeah, mate.
All right, take a quick break.